The laughter hit me like a wave. Not gentle chuckles or polite smiles, but real, genuine laughter that filled the break room and echoed off the walls. I stood there holding my resignation letter, watching faces I'd worked alongside for 20 years twist with amusement at my expense. Troy Benson, my manager, leaned back in his chair so far it creaked under his weight. His face was red from laughing, and he wiped tears from the corners of his eyes like I'd just told the funniest joke he'd ever heard. "You? Leaving?" he managed between gasps. "Don't make me laugh, Ira. Where would you even go? You've been here too long to matter anywhere else." More laughter erupted around the table. Someone, I think it was Kyle from accounting, actually clapped like this was some kind of comedy show. My fingers trembled around the envelope containing my resignation letter, but not from fear or embarrassment. From pure, concentrated rage that I was forcing myself to swallow. I took a slow breath and made myself smile. "I just thought you should know." Troy waved his hand dismissively. Sure. Good one, Ira." Really had me going there for a second. The laughter continued as I turned and walked out of the break room, my coffee untouched on the counter. Behind me, I could hear Troy's voice carrying through the hallway. "Can you believe that guy?" That was the moment I decided they would never see me angry. Never see me hurt. They'd only see what happened when I disappeared. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. My name is Ira Denton. I'm 46 years old, and until that morning, I'd been a senior systems coordinator at Hollow Point Logistics for 21 years. More than 2 decades of my life poured into keeping that company running, fixing problems before they became disasters, building systems that actually worked. I started there fresh out of college when the company was small enough that everyone knew everyone's name. Back then, I'd believed in the place. I'd believed that hard work and loyalty meant something, that dedication would be recognized and rewarded. I was wrong. The company grew over the years, expanding from a small regional operation to a national logistics firm with offices in 12 states. I grew with it, learning every system, training every new hire, solving every crisis. I became the person people called when something broke, when a client had an emergency, when nobody else knew what to do. I was essential. Indispensable. Or so I thought. Then Troy Benson became my manager 18 months ago. He was younger, smoother, better at office politics than actual work. He had an MBA from a school that mattered more than experience, and he knew exactly how to make executives think he was brilliant. What he didn't have was my knowledge, my relationships, or my ability to actually make things work. But he had something I lacked, the willingness to take credit for other people's accomplishments and call it leadership. The theft happened 3 months before that morning in the break room. I'd spent 6 weekends, 32 hours of my own time, developing a predictive logistics system that could save Hollow Point millions of dollars annually. It was sophisticated work, combining machine learning algorithms with our existing infrastructure to forecast shipping delays and optimize routing. I'd built it from scratch, testing every component, documenting every line of code. When I finished, I sent the complete package to Troy with a detailed explanation of how it worked and what it could do for the company. He thanked me via email. 5 words, "Good work. I'll review it." 2 weeks later, during the quarterly presentation to the executive team, I sat in the back of the conference room and watched Troy present my system as his own creation. My slides. My code. My data visualization. My 6 weekends of work, displayed on the screen with his name as the primary author. This predictive system represents a major leap forward in operational efficiency, Troy said, clicking through my presentation with practiced confidence. I've been developing this concept for several months, and I believe it positions us ahead of our competitors. The director of operations, a woman named Patricia Keene, nodded approvingly. Excellent work, Troy. This is exactly the kind of innovation we need to stay competitive. I sat there in my chair, gripping a pen so hard it cracked in my hand. Nobody looked at me. Nobody acknowledged my name, which appeared nowhere in the presentation. I'd been completely erased. 2 days after that presentation, I was working at my desk when I heard Troy's voice nearby. He was talking to someone just around the corner from my cubicle, his voice low but not quite low enough. "Denton does good back-end work," he was saying. "But that's all it is. Back-end. The real value is in knowing how to position it, how to sell it to executives who don't understand technical details. That's leadership. That's what separates people like me from people like him." I stood up slowly and walked around the corner. Troy was standing with Patricia, the director who'd praised him during the presentation. When they saw me, the conversation stopped abruptly. "Ira," Troy said, his smile too bright and too fast. "We were just talking about the new system implementation schedule." I looked him directly in the eyes. "No, you were talking about how you took credit for my work. Let's be accurate about what we're discussing." Troy's smile faltered for just a moment before recovering. "Your work. Ira, we all contribute to projects here. This is a team effort, not individual glory-seeking. I built that entire system alone. Every line of code. Every algorithm. Every test case. You contributed an email that said, 'Good work.'" Patricia shifted uncomfortably. "I think we should discuss this in private if there's a concern about attribution." "There's no concern," Troy said quickly. "Ira's just confused about how project management works. People like you do the technical implementation. Leaders like me handle strategy and presentation. People like you." The phrase hung in the air like smoke. Troy leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper only I could hear. "Watch it, Denton. People like you are replaceable." The following month, Troy assigned me to train a new hire named Evan Reese. 27 years old, fresh MBA, eager expression that reminded me of how I'd looked 2 decades ago when I thought competence mattered more than politics. "Show him everything," Troy instructed during our initial meeting. "Evan's going to be taking on more responsibilities in the systems coordination area. I want him fully up to speed on all our processes." I understood immediately what was happening. Evan wasn't being trained to support me. He was being trained to replace me. But instead of resisting, I taught him everything. I showed him every system I'd built, every client relationship I'd cultivated, every process I'd optimized. I documented procedures I'd never written down before, shared passwords and access codes, explained the logic behind decisions I'd made years ago. Evan was a good kid, earnest and hardworking. He took detailed notes and asked smart questions. He had no idea he was being positioned to push me out, and I didn't tell him. It wasn't his fault that Troy was using him as a weapon. What Evan didn't realize, what Troy didn't realize, was that I was creating a comprehensive record of everything I did. Every system that bore my fingerprints. Every relationship that existed because of my work. Every piece of institutional knowledge that lived only in my head. I was building evidence of my value while simultaneously preparing for the day I'd take it all with me when I left. The breaking point came 6 weeks after I started training Evan. I was working late, as usual, when I received an email notification. Troy had accidentally copied me on a message to Patricia. The subject line read, "Personnel Planning Update." The message itself was brief but devastating, planning to transition Denton out by Q4. Evan will be ready to assume full responsibilities by then. This will give us cost savings while maintaining operational continuity. Denton's skill set is outdated anyway, we need younger talent with fresh perspectives. I read that email 3 times, my hands shaking. Not from shock, I'd suspected this was coming, but from the casual cruelty of it. 21 years of loyalty dismissed as outdated. My contributions erased as cost savings. My future eliminated in a single paragraph sent between 2 people who'd never built anything themselves. I closed my laptop and sat in the dark office for a long time. Outside my window, I could see the city lights reflecting off the river. I'd missed so many sunsets like this one, working late to fix problems and meet deadlines while people like Troy went home at 5 and took credit the next morning. That night, I drove home in complete silence. No radio, no podcasts, nothing but my own thoughts circling through my head. When I pulled into my driveway, I didn't go inside immediately. I just sat there with the engine off, making a decision that would change everything. I pulled out my phone and started making a list. The list was simple but comprehensive. Every project I'd created that kept Hollow Point running. Every client relationship I'd built through years of reliable service. Every system that only I fully understood because I'd built them before proper documentation was standard practice. The predictive logistics system Troy had stolen was just one item on a very long list. There were supply chain optimization tools, customer relationship databases, automated reporting systems, integration protocols with major clients, emergency response procedures, backup protocols that had saved the company from disaster more than once. All of it existed because of me. And none of it was properly documented anywhere except in my own notes and memory. I wasn't planning sabotage. I was simply recognizing my actual value and preparing to take it somewhere that would appreciate it. If Hollow Point wanted to replace me with someone younger and cheaper, they were welcome to try. But they'd learn exactly how much I did once I was gone. The next morning, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Renee Walker, a former colleague who'd left Hollow Point 3 years ago to join a growing logistics startup called Streamline Solutions. We'd worked well together, and she'd always told me I should consider making a change. "Renee, it's Ira Denton. Do you have time for lunch this week?" Her response was immediate. "Ira. Of course. How about Thursday?" We met at a quiet restaurant downtown. Renee looked healthier than I remembered, less stressed, more energized. She asked about Hollow Point, and I gave her the abbreviated version. "I'm thinking of making a change," I said carefully. Renee set down her coffee cup. "Ira, if you're serious about leaving, I know someone who'd be very interested in talking to you." The interview wasn't really an interview. Renee had arranged for me to meet with the CEO of Streamline Solutions, a woman named Victoria Hayes, at their downtown office. The building was smaller than Hollow Point's headquarters, but it felt more alive somehow. People moved with purpose instead of bureaucratic inertia. Victoria was direct and honest from the first handshake. "Renee's told me about your work. I've also done my own research. You've built most of Hollow Point's operational infrastructure over the past 2 decades, usually without proper recognition." I was surprised by her directness. "You've done your homework. I believe in understanding who I'm talking to. Renee says you're considering a change. Can I ask what prompted that?" I told her about Troy, about the stolen project, about training my own replacement. I kept emotion out of it, just stated facts. Victoria listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious as I talked. "So they're planning to push you out after you've transferred your knowledge to someone younger and cheaper," she said when I finished. "That's the plan." Victoria leaned forward. "Here's what I see. You have 2 decades of expertise in logistics systems. You have relationships with major clients. You understand the industry at a level most people never reach. And you're being treated as disposable by people who couldn't do a fraction of what you do." She pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. "This is what I'm prepared to offer if you're interested in joining Streamline. Director of Systems Integration. 20% salary increase. Full benefits. And something Hollow Point apparently doesn't offer, respect for your expertise." I opened the folder and saw numbers that made my breath catch. Not just the salary, but the position, the responsibilities, the recognition. Everything I'd earned at Hollow Point but never received. There's no pressure, Victoria said. Think about it. But Ira, I'll tell you this, we'd be lucky to have you. The offer letter arrived 2 days later via email. Formal, detailed, and genuine. I read it 3 times, feeling something shift inside my chest. This wasn't just about money or title. It was about being valued. About working somewhere that recognized contribution instead of stealing it. But I wasn't ready to accept immediately. I wanted to see exactly how far Troy would push things. I wanted to document everything so thoroughly that when I left, there would be no doubt about what I'd contributed and what would disappear with me. I spent the next 2 weeks creating the most comprehensive project documentation I'd ever assembled. Every system I'd built. Every process I'd optimized. Every client relationship I'd maintained. All of it organized, time-stamped, and saved in multiple locations. On Friday afternoon, I sent Troy a detailed report of all pending projects, system maintenance schedules, and upcoming deliverables. It was 47 pages long, meticulously organized, covering 3 months of work that needed to be managed. Troy's response came 30 minutes later, thanks. Looks fine. That was it. 47 pages of critical operational information dismissed with 2 words and a period. He hadn't even read it. I knew because several of the project names I'd listed were completely fictional, and he didn't question a single one. That night, I called Victoria Hayes and accepted her offer. My last day at Hollow Point was a Friday. I arrived early, before most people, and made copies of everything I legally could, my own project files, my personal notes, documentation I'd created on my own time. Nothing that belonged to Hollow Point, just the work that was legitimately mine. At 10 o'clock, Troy called what he described as an urgent department huddle. Everyone gathered in the main conference room. Probably 15 people from various teams. Troy stood at the front with his arms crossed, looking pleased with himself. Before we start the weekly review, he announced, Ira has something he wants to share with everyone. I realized immediately what he was doing. He'd somehow heard rumors about my resignation and wanted to make a public spectacle of it. He thought he was setting me up for embarrassment, forcing me to admit defeat in front of the whole team. I stood up slowly and pulled the resignation letter from my folder. The room went quiet as I walked to the front and handed the envelope to Troy. You're right, I said, my voice steady and clear. I do have an announcement. I'm resigning from Hollow Point, effective in 2 weeks. The silence that followed was absolute. Then someone laughed. Then someone else. Within seconds, the room filled with the sound of people laughing at me. Leaving? Where could you possibly go? Someone asked. Troy was grinning now. Come on, Ira. You've been here 21 years. You think someone's going to hire you at your age? I looked around the room at faces I'd worked with, trained, helped. They were all laughing. Every single one. I'm going somewhere my name won't be erased from my own work, I said quietly. More laughter erupted. Someone muttered, he's bluffing. I picked up my security badge from around my neck and placed it on the conference table. I'm not. I turned and walked out of the conference room while they were still laughing. Behind me, I could hear Troy's voice carrying through the hallway, saying something about loyalty and gratitude. I didn't listen. I just kept walking, past my cubicle, past the break room where this had all started, toward the elevator. My hands were steady now. The rage from earlier had transformed into something colder and more focused. They'd laughed at me. They'd dismissed me as irrelevant and replaceable. In 2 weeks, they'd learn exactly how wrong they were. I spent my notice period documenting exactly what I'd said I would, comprehensive handoff notes that looked thorough but were actually useless without the contextual knowledge I'd built over 21 years. I showed Evan where files were located but not how to use them. I explained processes but not why they were structured that way. I answered his questions literally but not helpfully. Nobody noticed. Troy was too busy congratulating himself on cutting costs. Evan was too inexperienced to know what questions to ask. The rest of the team was too focused on their own work to see the disaster approaching. On my last day, I cleaned out my desk, said goodbye to exactly no one, and walked out of Hollow Point Logistics for the final time. The security guard at the front desk was the only person who acknowledged my departure. "Good luck, Mr. Denton," he said. "Thank you," I replied. "They're going to need it more than I will." My first day at Streamline Solutions felt surreal. People asked for my input in meetings and actually listened to my answers. When I suggested improvements to their existing systems, Victoria encouraged me to implement them. When I mentioned a potential client contact, they asked me to make the introduction. It was bizarre being treated like my expertise mattered. After 21 years of being invisible at Hollow Point, suddenly being visible felt almost uncomfortable. But I adjusted quickly. This was what work should feel like: collaboration instead of credit stealing, recognition instead of erasure. But old habits die hard. Despite myself, I still checked Hollow Point's public systems occasionally. Their client portal was accessible to anyone with a login, and I still remembered my credentials. Just curiosity, I told myself. Just checking to see how things were going without me. That's when I noticed the first problems. 3 days after I left, a major shipping route optimization had failed, causing delays for one of their biggest accounts. The error logs showed someone had tried to fix my code without understanding how it worked, breaking the entire system. A week later, more issues appeared. Client reporting was generating incorrect data. Automated processes were triggering at wrong times. Small problems were compounding into bigger ones because nobody understood how my systems fit together. I felt no satisfaction watching this unfold. If anything, I felt sad. All that work, all those years of building something functional, now falling apart because Troy had prioritized politics over competence. The call came on a Tuesday morning, 10 days after I'd left Hollow Point. My phone showed a familiar number, Melissa Crane, one of the few people at Hollow Point who'd always been decent to me. "Ira," she said without preamble, "do you know why everything's falling apart here?" I leaned back in my new office chair, looking out at a view much better than my old cubicle. I assume because nobody understood how the systems I built actually worked. It's worse than that. Troy's been trying to fix things, but he's making everything worse. Yesterday he corrupted the entire client database trying to restore a backup. We've had 3 clients threaten to leave. Patricia is furious. I felt a small flicker of something that might have been satisfaction. I documented everything in my handoff notes. "Your notes don't make sense without you here to explain them," Melissa said. "Evan's trying his best, but he's lost. And Troy won't admit he has no idea what he's doing." There was a long pause. "Ira, I know this is probably not appropriate to ask, but—" "I'm not coming back," I interrupted gently. "I wasn't going to ask that. I was going to ask," she took a breath. "How's your new company? Are they hiring?" That surprised me. "You're thinking of leaving?" "I've been thinking of leaving since the day they laughed at you for resigning. Half the department has been talking about it. We're all tired of Troy taking credit for our work and treating us like we're disposable." I sat up straighter. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. If you're happy where you are, maybe there's room for a few more refugees from Hollow Point." I talked to Victoria that afternoon. She was intrigued by the idea of hiring experienced talent from Hollow Point, people who already understood logistics systems and wouldn't need extensive training. "If they're as competent as you, I'd be happy to interview them," she said. "We're growing fast enough that we can absorb good people." Over the next week, I had quiet conversations with 3 former colleagues. Melissa, who'd been with Hollow Point for 8 years. Brandon, a logistics analyst who'd trained under me 5 years ago. Keisha, a client relations manager who'd been passed over for promotion 3 times despite excellent performance. All of them had the same story. They'd watched me get laughed at for resigning, then watched the company fall apart after I left. They'd seen Troy panic and blame everyone except himself. They'd realized that if someone as essential as me could be treated as disposable, none of them were safe. They all interviewed with Streamline. Victoria was impressed by their experience and professionalism. Within 2 weeks, all 3 had offers. All 3 accepted. Then something unexpected happened. 2 more people from Hollow Point reached out. Then 3 more. Word was spreading that there was an alternative to staying at a company that didn't value its employees, and that alternative had a name: Streamline Solutions. By the end of the month, 8 people had resigned from Hollow Point's operations department. Nearly half of Troy's entire team, gone within 4 weeks of my departure. I heard through Melissa that Troy had called an emergency department meeting. She recorded it on her phone and sent me the audio file. I listened to it that evening, sitting in my new office after everyone else had gone home. Troy's voice was shrill, stressed in a way I'd never heard before. Does anyone here have loyalty? Does anyone remember what this company has done for you? Silence on the recording. Then someone, I think it was Brandon, spoke up. What has this company done for us, Troy? Besides take credit for our work and treat us like we're replaceable? That's not fair, Troy protested. We've invested in your training, your development. Ira Denton trained most of us, another voice interrupted. Not you. Not HR, Ira. And you laughed when he resigned. You called him outdated and irrelevant. Now look what's happening. We're experiencing temporary technical difficulties, Troy said. Nothing we can't overcome with the right attitude and team effort. The right attitude won't fix systems none of us understand, Brandon said. And there is no team anymore. Half of us are leaving. The meeting apparently ended shortly after that, with Troy storming out while his remaining employees sat in uncomfortable silence, wondering who would be next to resign. I listened to the recording twice, and I felt absolutely nothing. No satisfaction. No vindication. Just a quiet certainty that consequences were catching up with someone who'd never believed he'd face any. The real blow came 3 weeks after I left. Hollow Point's biggest client, a national retailer that represented 20% of their revenue, announced they were switching to a different logistics provider. That client was one I'd personally managed for 7 years. I'd built custom integrations for their systems. I'd responded to their emergencies at 2 in the morning. I'd optimized their shipping routes and saved them millions in costs. They'd stayed with Hollow Point specifically because of the relationship I'd built with their operations director. When I left, I'd sent a polite email to that operations director, letting him know I'd moved to Streamline Solutions and would be happy to discuss their needs if they were ever looking for alternatives. He'd called me the next day. Ira, I've been meaning to reach out. We've been having serious issues with Hollow Point since you left. Systems aren't working correctly. Response times are slow. The new person they assigned to our account doesn't understand our infrastructure. I'm sorry to hear that, I said honestly. Are you in a position to take us on as a client? Because I'd much rather work with you at a new company than with Hollow Point without you. I transferred the call to Victoria, and she closed the deal within a week. The same services, the same level of expertise, but now under Streamline's banner instead of Hollow Point's. When the news broke internally at Hollow Point, I heard Troy had actually thrown things in his office. 20% of their revenue, gone because he'd treated their key relationship manager as disposable. Troy's world continued to collapse in slow motion. Without experienced staff and with systems failing regularly, Hollow Point started missing deadlines. Client complaints increased. 2 more major accounts left for competitors. Patricia, the director who'd praised Troy's stolen work, apparently confronted him in a meeting that everyone in the office could hear through the walls. According to Melissa, who was still finishing out her notice period. Patricia had been furious. "You told me eliminating Denton's position would save costs and improve efficiency," Patricia had said. "Instead, we've lost 8 employees, 3 major clients, and our operational systems are in shambles. I want to know exactly how you plan to fix this." Troy, apparently, had no answer. He tried to blame me for leaving without proper documentation. He tried to blame Evan for not learning fast enough. He tried to blame the team members who'd resigned for disloyalty. But Patricia wasn't interested in blame. She was interested in results, and Troy couldn't deliver them because he'd never actually done the work himself. He'd only known how to take credit. 2 weeks later, Troy was placed on administrative leave pending a review of his department's performance. The company had hired external consultants to assess what had gone wrong, and those consultants had quickly identified that the problem started the day I left and accelerated as other experienced employees followed. Melissa sent me a message the day Troy cleaned out his desk. He didn't laugh on his way out. He didn't say anything to anyone. Just left with a box of his things, looking 20 years older than when you resigned. 6 weeks after leaving Hollow Point, I was sitting in a conference room at Streamline with Victoria and the executive team, reviewing quarterly results. The numbers were exceptional. We'd grown revenue by 30%, largely due to new clients we'd brought over from competitors, including 3 from Hollow Point. "I want to acknowledge something," Victoria said, looking at me directly. "When Ira joined us, I knew he was talented. What I didn't fully appreciate was how much his quiet competence would transform not just our operations, but our entire culture. He's shown everyone here what real leadership looks like, building people up instead of tearing them down, sharing knowledge instead of hoarding it, creating systems that work instead of taking credit for other people's systems." She paused. "Half the people in this room came from Hollow Point because they saw what Ira built here and wanted to be part of it. That's not just recruitment, that's proof of value." Around the table, my former Hollow Point colleagues nodded. Melissa, Brandon, Keisha, and 5 others who'd made the jump. We'd rebuilt at Streamline what we'd lost at Hollow Point, a team that respected each other, valued expertise, and shared success. After the meeting, Renee pulled me aside. "You know what Troy's doing now?" I shook my head. "I haven't kept track." "He's applying for jobs. Sending out resumes. One of them came through my network, someone forwarded it asking if I knew him." "What did you tell them?" Renee smiled. "I told them the truth. That he takes credit for other people's work and panics when he has to deliver on his own. That he drove 8 talented people out of his department in a month. That he lost major clients because he couldn't maintain relationships he didn't build." 3 months after my resignation, I received an email that I almost deleted without reading. The sender was Troy Benson, and the subject line was, "Can we talk?" I stared at that email for a full minute before opening it. Professional curiosity, I told myself. Nothing more. "Ira, I know you're probably surprised to hear from me. I want to apologize for how things ended at Hollow Point. I realize now that I didn't appreciate your contributions the way I should have. I was under a lot of pressure to deliver results, and I made mistakes in how I managed people. I'm hoping we can put that behind us. I'm currently exploring new opportunities, and I wondered if Streamline might be hiring. I know you're in a leadership position there. And I thought you might be willing to put in a good word for me. I think we could work well together with a fresh start. Let me know. Best, Troy." I read the email 3 times, feeling absolutely nothing. No anger. No satisfaction. No temptation toward either revenge or reconciliation. I forwarded the email to Victoria with a simple note, "Received this today. Wanted you to be aware in case he applies directly." Her response came within minutes, "Already rejected his application last week. Background check flagged concerns about integrity and management practices. Thank you for the heads up. I deleted Troy's email without responding and went back to work on an integration system for one of our newest clients. There was nothing to say to him. The consequences of his actions had already spoken louder than any words I could write. For months after leaving Hollow Point, I was working late on a Friday when Melissa stopped by my office. Most of the team had already left for the weekend, but a few of us were wrapping up projects. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" she asked, leaning against my doorframe. I looked up from my computer. "How do you mean?" "If Troy had just treated you with respect. If he'd given you credit for your work. If he'd valued loyalty instead of seeing people as disposable. Hollow Point would still have you. They'd still have all of us. They'd still have those clients. Everything would be different." I thought about that. Yeah, probably. But I wouldn't have ended up here. None of us would have. "True," she said. "I'm happier here than I ever was there. But it's strange how one person's arrogance can destroy so much." After she left, I sat thinking about her question. Would things have been different if Troy had been a better manager? Almost certainly. But would I have been happier staying at Hollow Point, even with recognition and respect? I realized the answer was no. Sometimes you don't know how bad a situation is until you see what good looks like. Hollow Point had been slowly suffocating me for years, but I'd adapted to it like someone adapting to bad air. Only when I left and breathed clean air did I understand how toxic it had been. Troy hadn't just failed as a manager. He'd done me a favor by making the situation so intolerable that I finally left. 6 months after my resignation, I ran into Patricia Keene at an industry conference. She looked tired, older than I remembered. When she saw me, she hesitated, clearly debating whether to approach. "Ira," she said finally. "I'm glad I ran into you. I owe you an apology." I waited for her to continue. "I should have questioned Troy's claims about that predictive logistics system. I should have checked who actually created it. I should have noticed that you trained every competent person in that department. I didn't do my job as a leader, and it cost the company someone invaluable. And it cost 8 other people their jobs when they followed me," I added. Patricia nodded. "Troy's gone now. We brought in new management, but the damage was done. We're still trying to recover from the operational failures and client losses. I wanted you to know that we recognize what happened was wrong. I appreciated the apology, but it didn't change anything. I hope you find the right people to rebuild." But Patricia, recognition after the fact doesn't mean much. What mattered was recognizing value when it was still there. She accepted that with a slight nod. "You're right. I learned that lesson the hard way. For what it's worth, everyone knows now what you built there and what we lost when you left." After she walked away, I thought about that conversation. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, but mostly I just felt sad. All that institutional knowledge, those years of building and optimizing systems, now lost to Hollow Point because they'd valued politics over competence. But that was their loss, not mine. I'd rebuilt elsewhere, in a place that appreciated what I did. 1 year after my resignation, Streamlined Solutions had tripled in size. We'd absorbed not just the former Hollow Point employees but talent from other companies where people were tired of being undervalued. Victoria had promoted me to VP of Operations, with a salary and benefits package that reflected my actual worth. More importantly, I'd built something real. A team that collaborated instead of competed. Systems that worked because they were designed properly, not just to make someone look good. Client relationships based on genuine service, not stolen credit. I'd also started mentoring younger team members, teaching them not just technical skills but something more important, how to recognize their own value and not accept environments that diminished it. One afternoon, a junior analyst named Tyler asked me, "Is it true you worked at your last company for 21 years before leaving?" "Yes." "Why did you stay so long if they didn't appreciate you?" It was a fair question. Because I thought loyalty mattered. I thought if I did good work, eventually I'd be recognized. I was wrong about that. So what changed? I finally understood that real loyalty isn't staying somewhere that doesn't value you. Real loyalty is to yourself and your work. The company that benefits from your loyalty should be one that earns it. Tyler nodded slowly, absorbing that. My uncle works at Hollow Point. He says it's not the same place it used to be. Nothing stays the same forever, I said. Sometimes that's for the best. 18 months after leaving Hollow Point, I received a letter in the mail. Not an email, an actual physical letter on expensive stationery. The return address was Hollow Point Logistics. Inside was a formal notification that the company was being acquired by a larger logistics firm. The letter thanked me for my years of service and informed me that my pension and retirement benefits would be transferred to the new parent company's systems. I set the letter down and thought about what that meant. Hollow Point, the company I'd spent 21 years building, no longer existed as an independent entity. They'd been absorbed by a competitor because they couldn't recover from the operational failures and client losses that followed my departure. I felt no satisfaction in that news. Just a strange sense of finality. The place I'd poured so much of my life into was gone, not because I'd destroyed it, but because its own leadership had valued appearance over substance, credit over competence, politics over performance. That evening, I told Victoria about the letter. She listened quietly, then said, "You know what the ironic thing is? We're talking to that same parent company about a partnership. They want to license some of our systems, specifically the predictive logistics platform you've been developing here." I looked at her, surprised. The same concept I built at Hollow Point? Better than that concept. You've refined it, improved it, made it more robust. And now the company that acquired Hollow Point wants to pay us for technology they could have had if they just treated you with respect. The irony was almost poetic. The system Troy had stolen and claimed as his own, the work that had been dismissed as my last contribution before being pushed out, had evolved into something valuable enough that Hollow Point's acquirer was willing to pay for it. "Are we doing the deal?" I asked. Victoria smiled. "That depends. You built it. You decide if you want to license it to them." I thought about that for a moment. This wasn't about revenge or withholding something out of spite. It was a business decision. Yes. License it to them. Charge them appropriately for the value it provides. But make sure the contract clearly states that I'm the creator and primary developer. "Already planned on it," Victoria said. "Your name will be on every page." 2 years after my resignation from Hollow Point, I was invited to speak at an industry conference about systems integration and team leadership. The invitation surprised me. I'd never considered myself a public speaker, but Victoria encouraged me to accept. "People need to hear your story," she said. "Not the revenge part or the schadenfreude about what happened to Troy. They need to hear about recognizing your value and having the courage to take it somewhere it would be appreciated." The conference was in Chicago, attended by hundreds of logistics professionals. I stood backstage, nervous in a way I hadn't been in years, watching other speakers present before my slot. When my turn came, I walked out to polite applause and looked at the sea of faces in the audience. I'd prepared remarks, practiced what I wanted to say, but in that moment, I decided to speak from the heart instead. "My name is Ira Denton," I began. 2 years ago, I resigned from a company where I'd worked for 21 years. When I announced my resignation, people laughed. They thought I was too old, too entrenched, too irrelevant to matter anywhere else. I paused, letting that sink in. They were wrong. But more importantly, I was wrong. I was wrong to stay so long in a place that didn't value me. Wrong to accept being invisible. Wrong to think that loyalty meant accepting disrespect. I talked for 30 minutes about building systems, developing teams, and recognizing when it's time to leave. I didn't mention Troy by name or trash talk Hollow Point directly. I didn't need to. The story spoke for itself. When I finished, the applause was genuine and sustained. Afterward, dozens of people approached me with their own stories of being undervalued, of struggling with whether to stay or leave, of wondering if they were making the right decision. One woman, probably in her 50s, shook my hand with tears in her eyes. "I've been at my company for 17 years, and they treat me exactly how you described. I thought I was the problem. Thank you for showing me I'm not." Today, 3 years after leaving Hollow Point, I sit in my office at Streamline Solutions with a view of the city skyline. The company has grown to over 200 employees, many of them people who left toxic work environments to join a team that values competence and integrity. I still hear occasional updates about Hollow Point through industry connections. The acquisition was difficult. Many of their remaining employees were let go during the integration. The systems I built, the ones that had kept them running for 2 decades, were gradually replaced by the parent company's infrastructure. The institutional knowledge I'd accumulated over 21 years was lost forever because nobody had properly documented it after I left. Troy, as far as I know, ended up at a much smaller firm in a position well below what he'd held at Hollow Point. His reputation in the industry never recovered. Word had spread about what happened, and logistics is a smaller world than people think. Everyone knows someone who knows someone, and stories travel fast. But this story isn't really about Troy's downfall. It's about something else entirely. It's about the moment I stopped accepting being invisible and started recognizing my own value. About understanding that loyalty is a two-way street, and staying somewhere that doesn't value you isn't loyalty, it's fear. About the courage it takes to walk away from something familiar, even when that familiar thing is slowly destroying you. When they laughed at me that day in the break room, they thought they were laughing at someone powerless, someone who had no options, someone who would slink away defeated. They were wrong. I didn't slink away. I walked away with dignity, with my expertise intact, and with a clear understanding of my worth. And when I did, I created a vacuum that they couldn't fill because they'd never understood what I actually did. Half the team following me out the door wasn't revenge. It was validation. Those people saw what I'd built at Streamline and recognized it as something better than what they had. They saw a workplace that valued their contributions, and they made the same choice I'd made, to take their talent somewhere it would be appreciated. The laughter stopped long before Troy's career ended. It stopped when the first system failed. It stopped when the first client left. It stopped when people realized that the person they dismissed as irrelevant had been holding everything together all along. I never set out for revenge. I just stopped accepting disrespect and started building something better. Sometimes that's all revenge needs to be, living well, building well, and proving that the people who dismissed you were wrong about your value. They laughed when I said I was leaving. They're not laughing anymore. And me? I'm not laughing either. I'm just quietly building, mentoring, and creating, exactly what I should have been doing all along, but now in a place where it matters. That's the real victory. Not their failure, but my success. Not their regret, but my peace. Not proving them wrong through destruction, but through creation. The best revenge, I've learned, isn't burning down what others built. It's building something better and inviting everyone who was tired of the old place to join you. And when you do it right, when you do it with integrity and competence and respect for the people who work with you, you don't need to gloat. You don't need to publicize their failures or celebrate their downfall. You just need to show up every day, do excellent work, and let the results speak for themselves. That's what I did. That's what I'm still doing. And 3 years later, I can finally say with complete honesty, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, doing exactly what I'm meant to do, with people who value what I bring. They thought I'd be nothing without them. Instead, I discovered I could be everything I'd always been, just finally seen and appreciated for it. The laughter faded long ago. What remains is the quiet satisfaction of knowing I made the right choice, the hard choice, the choice that led me here. And that's worth more than any hollow victory could ever be.